All right, good morning, everybody. It is Friday, August 2nd, and this is a special edition of Tracking the Tropics. From Central Florida, I'm WESH 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And from Savannah, Georgia, I'm WJCL 22 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
So, Jeremy, we're here on a special edition because we have a little tropical thing to track, my friend.
Yeah, the lull in the tropics likely ends this weekend. Our next named storm, Debbie, set to form. 90% chance of that now, and you're going to go over kind of the lay of the land and show everyone where this is at currently.
Yeah, so here's the satellite imagery on it right now. It's not become a big bad hurricane. That certainly is the good news. It is still an invest, tagged Invest 97. And all that means is that it is a tropical wave that we are now tagging. And once we tag it, we have the opportunity to run computer models and do all those very specific things. So, as Jeremy mentioned, there is now a high chance of this developing. According to the National Hurricane Center, it has a 60% chance of forming over the next 2 days' time and a 90% chance of it forming over the next 7 days' time. Visible satellite presentation on it this morning, certainly looking good. Now, of course, remember that as the sun comes up, visible satellite is only available during daylight hours, but now that the sun is coming up over the storm system, we're going to have a much better idea of exactly the way that it looks. And, with the sun up, maybe we'll get some additional convection. And Jeremy, we may see some organization, but land interaction is going to be a big player for this thing today.
Yeah, we have over Cuba a little bit higher terrain there, so we'll see. The low again is not very strong, just a pretty broad area of low pressure there. Maybe a little bit of a twist with this tropical wave. You can see those clouds building, though, as we do have some thunderstorms firing up into parts of maybe the southern Bahamas area, Cuba. This is sort of exited the Hispaniola area of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. So now we'll see if this low is bumped north of Cuba when it forms, or if it's maybe just south, because that eventually farther down the road would have an impact on future track.
Right. And the thing to understand when it comes to tropical systems is that small changes now dictate very big changes down the road. So in this case, because it is so sloppy, it's not all that well organized, we have to wait for it to form. Systems that are forming try to form. And I say that it sounds so silly, right? But in other words, if it's around Cuba, does that low try to form a little north of the island or a little south of the island? These, while it's very ancillary right now, will have big impacts looking down the road. So, for example, look at the computer forecast models, and more specifically, before we even look at where it goes down the line, notice how all the models are developing the low and kind of riding it along the Cuban island, eventually coming off the north side. But if it were to develop on the north side and stay off, or if it were to develop on the south side and stay off, Jeremy, that would play in fairly significantly to kind of down the road type forecast ideology.
Yeah, so those model tracks that you're showing there, most of them now, I would say compared to maybe like 24, 36 hours ago, a quicker, harder right northeast turn. So less time in the Gulf of Mexico, maybe also then a lot less time for this to strengthen or organize further before it has the next land interaction. But one thing we always talk about is impacts. It doesn't matter if it's tropical storm, hurricane, it's all about what kind of impacts you can expect and also kind of how to prepare for those. So whether it stays in the Gulf or cruises over Florida, there are going to be some locations that see quite a bit of rain.
Yeah, and I think that that's going to be the biggest concern out of this, because looking at the intensity models here, what we're not seeing is any kind of off the charts kind of stuff. And that's good. We definitely don't want to see that. But nevertheless, it's at least worth noting, right? That it stays fairly weak right through landfall. And thus, at the moment, it doesn't look like we're going to be dealing with rapid intensification. Though I will say, Jeremy, looking at the ship's model this morning, it at least gave like a 20% chance of rapid intensification. So it's not a complete zero, but it's just kind of one of those lower end kind of things.
And I think that would occur, or the potential would be higher if this was over the Gulf longer and went more north versus turning to the northeast. So We were discussing this that we may see it strengthen. It could be a tropical storm somewhere in the southeastern Gulf, and then a land interaction. And then once it's into the southwestern Atlantic, and this would probably be off from the Georgia coastline if this were to occur as it's moving northeast, re-strengthening. Those waters there by the Gulf Stream are around 86 degrees or so. And as it approaches maybe the north area of South Carolina, North Carolina, somewhere off that coastline, that is where we could see additional strengthening. So we may see it form initially, weaken a bit with land interaction, and then start to re-strengthen in the Southwest Atlantic.
It's all going to depend on its paths these next couple of days. So I think that that's an important thing to look at. And one way that we can actually look at that is by using the various global models, right? And so let's do this. Let's take a look at the American GFS model, okay, and just kind of get an idea of where we're at. And Jeremy, this at least this version of the GFS is came in just a couple of hours ago, and notice how it keeps it pretty weak. Those blue shades down there, just off the southwest coast of Florida, that would indicate perhaps a tropical storm or something to that effect in that time frame.
Yeah, and it looks like those winds are fairly confined there. So that would be southwest part of Florida. Maybe that's what's down there. We got Marco Island,
Yeah.
some locations there, maybe up towards Fort Myers. But again, we're not seeing those sort of red or maybe pinkish colors starting to show up, which would indicate much higher winds.
Right.
Um, so the winds, though, definitely could have tropical storm force. And as you mentioned, rain is also definitely a concern. I know some models have been churning out 5, 6+ inches of rain, and oftentimes that is not spread out over a long duration. So you can start to see at least some sort of flooding.
Right, right. And I think that that's definitely going to be the bigger concern. Now watch, this is 5 a.m., just a snapshot of 5 a.m. Let me take it through time here, okay? And by 10 p.m. on Sunday, watch how it's already off the first coast of Florida, and then from there we progress it through, and by 9 a.m. on Monday, Jeremy, it's already off and past your coastline.
Yeah, and that would really keep a lot of the wind issues offshore if this model was correct. And again, this is just one of many that we look at. This one does have that core of the winds more into the Southwest Atlantic. So obviously, cruise lines, shipping channels, they would be more interested in this. And then, as Eric is showing there, you start to see almost an eye forming, and that is where we think as it moves farther to the north, additional strengthening definitely is a possibility, and that's been pretty consistent with most models.
Yeah, and if that's the case, the Outer Banks, as shown here, and again, this is one run of one model, but in this case, the Outer Banks could not be ruled out as an eventual kind of impactor point. So while all of the tropical models are looking right now, at least in the Florida area, like we cannot ignore what comes afterward down the line, even beyond your area, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, if I was anywhere from like Myrtle Beach up to the Outer Banks, I would also be watching this very closely. Obviously, my area, the Low Country down through coastal Georgia, we're keeping tabs on this. And something that the National Hurricane Center hinted at with their last update was that they'll probably be issuing some sort of tropical storm watches today. And that would probably be for maybe parts of your area, the Florida coast.
I would suspect so. I would suspect so, which means that we probably get into a potential tropical cyclone at that point, which is no more of an organized system, but rather just allows them to start issuing forecast cones, watches, and warnings and things like that. And our colleagues in Fort Myers and in Key West, all the meteorologists around South Florida certainly are watching this particularly closely because of the added impacts. And then, from there, is it Sun Coast of Florida? Is it the Nature Coast of Florida? Tampa? We'll have to see where it eventually goes. But I think with this particular system, because it's as weak as it is, and I'm curious on your thoughts, right? Because as weak as it is, I think that this is going to be a flooding concern and even the potential of some smaller tornadoes, depending on exact tracks.
Yeah, you were showing, I think you had a graphic that you were showing maybe some tornado potential for
Yeah.
parts of Florida. Now, if this would stay East of my area, off from the coast of Georgia, there would not be much of any type of tornado threat. It's really, it looks like near and south of your area, a little bit of a chance there, maybe a spin up tornado.
Right. So Fort Myers, West Palm Beach, the Space Coast, the Treasure Coast, those would be areas, at least based on kind of current model thought, that could have a higher opportunity for spin up tornadoes. And if you're new to the whole tropical machine, um, the right front quadrant. So it all depends on the direction of the storm system, right? So let's just back this up. So say that the storm system is moving. I'm just going to draw a line and say that this is the actual path of the storm system. On the right side of that, highlighted in yellow here, right? On the right side of that, you have this little added threat of spin, this added little torque, this shear, if you will. And because of that, you usually see these little brief spin up tornadoes. We've seen it in so many different storms. It keeps people very, very busy. And ironically enough, Jeremy, if this were to play out, it would be during my shift on Sunday morning.
All right, and you would be all ready to go. I'm sure your team weather coverage there will be awesome. But yeah, tornado threat, I would say threat of some heavy rain. And then also, we haven't really addressed this yet, but maybe more for the southeast coast for parts of the area. We'll have to watch our tides. They'll start running higher than average, especially if we start to spin in a little more east or southeast winds. So we could have tides a little bit higher. Uh, Coastal flooding, we'd have to see the tide level for that. And then storm surge, that might be farther to the north of our areas. We're talking maybe up Myrtle Beach or the Outer Banks, where their tides could start getting a little bit higher, especially if this would be over the water longer and
Right.
also stronger.
Yeah, yeah. So one additional thing, we've been talking about the flooding potential, Jeremy, and I think that it's at least important to mention that the Weather Prediction Center is at least highlighting for Sunday into Monday, kind of the central part of the peninsula of Florida, down through the southwest coast, all the way up through the Carolinas, and then into Monday, Tuesday, that shifts into the Outer Banks, and of course points further and further to the north.
And I think we'll get that fine tuned when the track comes
Yeah,
into focus because that covers a lot of the inland areas
yeah.
of my viewing area. And typically, if these storms track offshore and they're away from the coast a bit,
Mhm.
it's mainly like Interstate I 95 and points east. And that's not a huge land area, but it's an
Right.
area with a lot of population.
Yeah, yeah.
That's typically where we would see the rain, and then you start moving inland and it would cut off very fast.
Yeah, yeah. So at this point, this is the hits, runs, and errors, right? Now there's a lot of questions. I see Lawrence posting on your page, Jeremy. Great assessment of potential issues. Thank you, which is always great to see. Samantha on my page. What about flights out of Sanford on Monday? The good news is I think by Monday things should start getting back to normal, at least across Florida. Now for your area, it's going to be delayed a little bit, but I think for Florida things would be getting back to normal. So there's that. There's that. Sonia's talking about the dirty side. Yeah, it would put Florida, depending on exact tracks, right? It would put Florida on the dirty side, the wet side. But for your area, interestingly enough, Jeremy, as long as it stays off the shoreline, it would keep you on the drier side, which could potentially like make you completely dry if it really undergoes tropical cyclogenesis.
Yeah, I would say if it cuts off your coast, maybe St. Augustine, Jacksonville, and then continues northeast,
Yeah.
that would definitely cut off our rain potential. For inland areas, coastal areas probably still see at least a period of some rain. It would also not maybe eliminate completely, but greatly reduce any type of severe threat here in terms of like spin up tornadoes.
Right.
Um, and then this will probably re-strengthen once it's in the Southwest Atlantic. Now, if for some reason you were showing those forecast model tracks a bit earlier,
Yeah.
there were a couple that were a little bit farther to the west. And if those happen to be right, then definitely my area would start to see the heavier rain potential.
Well,
So
and
right
so
now, a
to
lot of them are grouped near Jacksonville off the southeast coast. A couple of those are farther inland.
Yeah. And to that point, there's two kind of scenarios, and I think that they almost work opposite for us, right? So for Central Florida, for example, the two scenarios as we see it, you've got the West camp. There's almost like two camps developing. The West camp that Jeremy was just mentioning for Florida would be a less threat for flooding, and a lesser threat for severe weather, whereas that easterly camp would put us more in game for severe weather and more in game for flooding. Whereas, Jeremy, the westerly camp would mean more impacts for you. The easterly camp would mean less impacts for you.
Yeah, and I'm watching here. I know so just to give everyone an idea, when we do our track of the tropics, the computer, Eric is doing an awesome job. He always runs that, the graphics. I kind of sit over here on the laptop, and since today's our special edition of Track and Tropics, I'm trying to look at some of the latest data coming in here. So the NAM computer model, maybe not like a fan favorite of tropical forecasting, but hey, it's one that we look at and I just compare it back to previous runs to see, all right, is it slower, faster, stronger, east or west? And that is starting to come in right now. It has at 2 a.m. on Sunday, the low kind of well to the west of like Marco Island, maybe Fort Myers area, a little west southwest of there. And if you compare it to the previous computer model run, it's a little bit slower and maybe a couple millibars stronger this time. So we'll see if how it's only out through 42 hours. So that's kind of the quick analysis of that.
Yeah, I've got it. I have it through 39 hours. So yours is going to be quicker, but I've got through
Okay.
39. But I'm trying to show it here. So
I
yeah.
mean, it's just, how about, I haven't really, I looked yesterday and it was a much faster turning into Florida, the RPM or IBM model.
Which run yesterday, and I'll pull it up.
Well, if you have the latest, let's just look at the latest data. I'm sure the 12Z is not in yet, but if the 6Z,
Yeah.
that's another high resolution model that historically, at least in previous hurricane seasons, has done very well.
All right.
Um, I would say with our current system here, initially the European model did not do well. It got outperformed by like the GFS and the Icon. The GFS obviously had its issues. It was doing loops and everything, but it has always been consistent with tracking this into the Gulf.
Right. So here's the current futurecast run. So that's the I'm looking at pressure. So there's your pressure
Okay.
kind of around Southwest Florida, and then kind of riding almost like right along the shoreline there, right?
Okay. And is that you're looking at pressure right there?
Yeah, that's mean sea level pressure. So it would be like a landfall around Tampa Bay, 7:30 on Sunday morning,
Okay.
and then from there, kind of dropping the pressure once it gets off the shoreline. Perhaps let's see. Let me do that. Do that.
I also think with the weak nature of this low right now, models are kind of having a hard time. Like when I'm
Yeah.
watching this NAM come in, like
Yeah.
1 6 hour window, it's here, then it kind of hops it, and
Right.
it's a little confusing if you're a forecaster trying to really pin down and give people details of this. But yeah, I would say Tampa area down towards maybe like Marco Island, that corridor in there could get brushed by some pretty heavy rain.
Well, and this is the futurecast model, but it's showing wind. And
Okay.
I got to tell you, like, and I looked at this on my coffee talk this morning. It's not throwing much wind in there. I mean, it's doing rain, but it's not throwing much wind around. It's keeping gusts of. It's keeping it a depression essentially.
Okay. Well, that's obviously good news. It looks like there maybe something a little stronger south of Fort Myers. It looks
But
like
the
some.
center's already. If you look at the track of this, the center will already be in by that point.
Oh,
That's
okay.
it looks like it's
That may just be some thunderstorms moving in.
yeah, it looks like the center's up near like Sarasota, north of Fort Myers. If you look at kind of the axis of the spinning there.
Okay. So at this point, since most of us have short-term memories in terms of most things, if we just think back in terms of last year with the Dahlia, now that one stayed over the water, and that's why that one was definitely a stronger storm.
And it had that opportunity, that time horizon to do its thing as well. It also was a little later in the season, if memory
Yeah.
serves, right? Wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah. So
Yes.
the atmosphere was perhaps a little different. But this is not out of the norm, right? To have a system like this to track. It is a part of our hurricane forecast kind of timeline and positioning, so that's lining up. But Jeremy, we're still not to the peak of hurricane season yet, so things like this are going to start to pop up, and then more and more, I think, down the line we'll have to track.
Yeah, and this also sort of slid between those pockets of dusty, dry air we've been talking about that really helped to give us a quiet back half of July. So we'll start off August here, probably with a name storm, and the next name is Debbie. But that would be the fourth name storm so far this year. So at least in terms of names, we're trending pretty close to average, maybe just slightly above. And then in terms of the strength for the entire season, when you accumulate all the energy, the ACE score, we're definitely above. We could go all the way through August with no name storms and still be at average. And really what skewed that was how strong Beryl was.
Right, 100% accurate. That was way out of the norm. So, at this point in time, this is where we're at. There's not much of a system yet. It's trying to get its act together, and I'm watching the National Hurricane Center database just to see if they're going to pull the trigger on any kind of a PTC upgrade. It doesn't look quite like we're there for 11. We're getting close, though. I will say, looking at the database, they're going to get close to popping that, and they still may do it at 11 o'clock. So we'll have to see how it all plays out.
And then also, I saw you may have a little more detailed time. The hurricane hunters are going to be flying later today, I think.
Yeah, let's see. I haven't even I haven't even looked at that today. All right,
I
so
just saw that
Outlook.
in the notes of the last update around 7:30 this morning. That
So 18Z, so it's 1422Z now. So in about 4 hours or so, could have a mission, and then 3 at 0, and then again at about 8 o'clock tonight. Yeah, so in a couple of hours we may start to see missions firing up, leaving from Lakeland and then leaving from other points around to get down there, both tail Doppler and C-130. So they're planning on P3s and C-130s in. So yeah, they're ready to go should they decide to elect to do that. But a couple things. This is around Cuba. Let's just add, the United States and Cuba aren't exactly best friends, so I have seen where the hurricane hunters have been allowed to traverse Cuba. I have seen where they have not, but they don't do recon missions while a center is over land. So, to that point, if a low tries to form over water today, perhaps, I would suspect that they would try to go out and start investigating. However, they're not going to chase it over land per se.
okay,
And
but
to that point, Hurricane Center just tweeted out like 9 minutes ago. And you know what stinks isn't as annoying? I looked at it literally 10 minutes ago. They're going to initiate advisories on potential tropical cyclone 4 at 11. So
oh, okay,
there's that.
okay. So we'll have probably some watches then, right, for your coast,
I would suspect at the very least, Southwest Florida probably getting into some watches. Yeah.
and those would be so everyone knows. We think they would just be tropical storm
Yeah.
watches at this point,
Yeah.
and that
I
would
would
be
think so.
for probably threat of heavy rain, maybe some wind gusts. They'll probably mention in there around 40 miles per hour or
Yeah,
so.
yeah. The flooding and like some pockets of wind, and even like the threat for some tornadic spin ups, especially Fort Myers, West Palm Beach, Miami, and then like my southern areas, depending on its exact pathways. Right?
Yes. And also, I'm like kind of doing play by play of the NAM here, which is always an interesting thing. But so that would be 11 a.m. on Sunday, the very latest NAM is maybe a hair to the west of the
Yeah,
6Z run. And
yeah.
it is also a little bit, a couple millibars stronger, it looks like on
I
this.
I mean, so NAM 12Z, I see 1,004 millibars, whereas the 6Z had like 985. So I mean,
Oh, are you looking at the um the high res one or just a regular one?
3 kilometer.
Oh, okay. So you are looking at the high res. I was just looking at this other one. Sometimes
Oh,
it
the
runs a
12
little bit.
kilometer.
It runs a little bit ahead. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. I'm looking at the high res. It's weaker. It's not as strong.
Okay. At least the regular old NAM is maybe a hair to the west. It has it starting to approach Tampa, probably at midday Sunday, and it does look like it has definitely on that sort of east or southeast side. What looks like on the model here, some definitely some heavy rain. Whether it lasts an hour, 2 hours, or 6 hours, that would be the question.
Yeah. I'm looking at yeah. The higher resolution definitely has some good. That's like a nine. That's like a 6 hour rain, and it's showing isolated pockets of 4 to 6 inches of rain in the 6 hour time frame. So that's a big swath of rain off of the NAM for sure.
Okay. Any other questions? Let me see here.
Yeah, there's a lot of people asking, am I going to get a tornado in my area? And I think that the simple answer is there's no way for us to tell you that.
Right.
There's just not. It's just not in the cards.
And even when we talk about when the Storm Prediction Center puts out, hey, there's a 2%,
Yeah.
5% chance of a tornado, that's not every square mile. That's the percent chance within, I think it's like what, 25 miles of a
25 or
point?
50, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So I had a question on my Facebook page, and I think it was for Eric here. Is it Dunellen, Florida?
Denellen,
Dunellen, yes, sorry.
yeah.
Um,
We're probably
um,
not going to get a hurricane to Denellen. Is that the question?
it was just kind of like, basically, will this come to that area? Will I have to stay in? This person does not drive. They usually walk or maybe
Yeah.
bike to their spots.
At the moment it's really wet and sloppy. I think at the moment it's probably just going to be a rain event with some pockets of gusty winds and some um some tornadic potential. So if anyone's asking like should I evacuate? This is not like a category 5. This is not a category 1 right now. We'll see what the cone says at 11 o'clock when they come out with that. But for right now this is not a massive impactor. This is just going to be a storm system that gives us probably a pretty crummy forecast for Sunday. It's going to be wet and sloppy, and we move on with our lives. It's important to note, and I don't know about your climate so much there, Jeremy, but like Central Florida depends on a wet, sloppy storm system or two.
We can depend on that. We have had a ton of rain here lately, so a lot of rain for us would not be a good thing. We had a couple flood events here in Savannah recently with some pretty widespread street flooding with
Yeah.
torrential rain out of thunderstorms. So, if we could avoid another heavy rain event, that would be certainly some great news for us.
I would say that at least at the moment, it seems like you should be in a pretty decent spot to avoid that.
Yes, as long as this starts turning northeast, that's going to take that corridor of heavy rain, as you were showing, and probably shift it off the coastline. So for us, is there going to be some rain? I think there will be. Do we avoid the heaviest rain? Hopefully that stays likely offshore if this tracks again to the northeast. So if it would be a little more to the north, then we would probably have to deal with at least
Yeah.
some hours of steadier rain.
Yeah. All right. So let's see other questions here. We should take one for the team so that Jeremy's area does not get as much rain. Yeah. I mean, we need the rain. Jeremy's area does not as much. So there's that. Um, let's see here. Is there going to be an eye forming over the Gulf? The models are erring on a wetter, sloppier, weaker type scenario, which is, that's fine with me. That's what we could hope for everything. So Lisa's asking Ormond Beach tornadoes. For now, I would say it depends on the eventualities of the storm system. This is a graphic that we make at WESH when it comes to developing systems. And I'm going to put this up, and this is more for my viewership, but like
Okay.
today, we're tracking it. The impact confidence is medium, and we're not getting into specificity yet. Tomorrow, if needed, if it looks like it's going to blow up, we could do some prep. If not, we don't need to. Tomorrow we'll have a higher confidence of what's going to happen. And then Sunday, the storms are impacting. This is not an Ian. This is not a Nicole. This is not, this does not look like it's going to be that kind of a storm system. So let's just make sure to keep calm and to keep relaxed. Brandon says Tony had posted, it seems the storm models have shifted to the east. I posted the same thing. I get it. We've talked about it,
Right.
Brandon. Yeah, this is a mess still. It's trying to get organized, but let's not overhype ourselves. I've had a few friends, even Jeremy, saying, I've got friends that are freaking out. What do I tell them? And it's like, well, let's start by not freaking out. This is not
Right.
going to be a massive disaster, thankfully, according to model data. Could it pulse up a
Yeah.
little stronger? Sure.
Yeah. And the NAM right now looks like it has it over Tampa or Clearwater at about 5 p.m. on Sunday. So that's kind of the latest. It's a
5
hair
p.m. or 5 a.m.?
uh, 5 p.m. Sunday.
So that's slow.
The NAM is a little bit slower, yes. If you
Yeah.
compare it to the 60 run, which had it a little bit north of there, but really not that much. This isn't like a huge difference. It is slightly stronger in terms of millibars.
Yeah.
So we'll
The
see. It still
model.
looks like a lot of rain, but again, it's all about what you're showing there. The model tracks.
So let me go over the timing real fast. You bring that up. So this is Saturday at 2 p.m. The end of the line is where these models think at 2 p.m. Saturday. All right. At 10 p.m. Saturday, models are pretty close to Southwest Florida. This is 6 a.m. on Sunday. Notice the majority of the models are pretty close to Tampa. By 1 p.m., mainly north of Orlando area. By 6, 7 p.m., around Jacksonville, Gainesville, and then passing by your area, Jeremy, early on Monday. That's the only reason that I bring up the NAM timing is that is significantly slower than the majority of these other models.
Okay. Well, it is a little bit, yeah, it's a little bit slower. I would say another model that has been slower is the Icon model, which
Yeah.
in past years I didn't think it did very well, but so far this year it has been a pretty solid model. It had one of the only tracks towards Texas with Barrel,
Yeah.
so it definitely had a win there. And this time around, though, it definitely is different than other models in terms of its speed. The NAM then kind of starts taking it across Central Florida here pretty quick by
Right.
8 p.m. on Sunday, and it's a little bit stronger. It also appears like the turn is a little quicker compared to the 60. So
Which it would
I
be if it was stronger, so that makes sense.
hmm
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess we'll just have to. I mean, we're gonna wait and see, and we'll be ready for whatever happens.
Well, and to that point, like Riley's asking about Citrus County, and it's kind of it's I hate to have to say this, but it's the same idea of like we can't tell you that yet. It's big and sloppy, and odds are this is going to impact all of us in Florida with a bunch of rain and some areas with severe weather. It's not going to be like a concise hurricane where you're tracking the majority of the impacts. These weaker systems, they're sloppy, they're wider out, they're just kind of bleh. So let's not get into the specificity yet. We don't know that yet. We'll get a better idea tomorrow, and we'll certainly keep you up to date. In Florida with WESH, our sister station WZVN and WBBH in Fort Myers, WPBF in West Palm Beach, and then of course up into the Low Country and what's the other area? What do you call it? So is it Savannah in the Low Country? Is that
Yeah,
what you?
or coastal Georgia, Low Country.
That's what I was looking for.
Low Country goes basically up to like Charleston area.
Yep.
And then if you start getting closer to Myrtle Beach, that's the Grand Strand.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jeremy's got you covered up there. I've got you covered in Orlando and our sister stations around Florida as well. All right. I think that's all we've got for now, Jeremy. If need be, we'll be up. I know I'll certainly be posting today. I know you'll certainly be posting today.
Yeah, absolutely. If anything changes, and again, we'll be watching for potential tropical cyclone 4.
All right. We'll have the cones put out for you shortly. But in the meantime,
All right.
make it a great day from Central Florida. I'm WESH 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And from Savannah, Georgia, I'm WJCL 22 Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.